You are listening to a podcast of the Fahey and Shivari Show, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Thursdays, only on SportsTownChicago.com.
Oh, you know what this music means. It's that time of the show here every Thursday, and it's time to get to the Illinois Center for Broadcasting hotline, and that's where we find our guy, Gabe Salgado, with me here on the Illinois Center for Broadcasting hotline on the Fahey and Shivari Show here on SportsTownChicago.com. It's time to talk some college football. Gabe, how are you this afternoon, man?
Doing good. How about you?
Doing great, thank you. So let's get into the college football realm locally around here. The Big Ten standings in the West Division of the Big Ten. It's Northwestern at 1-2. They're at the bottom of it right now. They're taking on the leader of the East Division in Penn State this weekend out at Penn State. It seems like Northwestern has been on that free fall, Gabe, and it's something about it to where if Northwestern finishes under 500, in my mind, head coach Pat Fitzgerald has got to be on the hot seat, unfortunately. I love him. I love the guy a lot, but I feel like he's got to be on the hot seat. What's your thoughts on if Northwestern does fall to 500 at the end of the season? Is Pat Fitzgerald really on the hot seat?
Definitely. He's definitely on the hot seat because Northwestern right now, I mean, you know, they're a team that's struggling to find an identity. They're not very good on defense, and they're even worse on offense. Granted, they got their first victory of the season over the weekend, but again, it was against Western Illinois. It wasn't exactly, anybody significant, unfortunately. And then no disrespect to Western Illinois, but they're an FCS team, and I'm not quite sure how they've been over the last few years. But the thing about Western Illinois is that they're not as strong as some of these other teams, so Northwestern really needs to get it together.
Looking at the running back play here, as we all know, Venrick Mark transferred out of Northwestern to be closer to home down in Texas. Local Glenbar North product, Justin Jackson, is beginning the most carries and yards, 41 carries, 184 yards on the ground, with averaging about 4.5 yards per carry with 2 rushing touchdowns. What's been your take on the Northwestern running game so far? Because it seems like they're obviously going back and forth with it, but it doesn't seem like that's the worst of the problems that Northwestern has on the squad, on the football team.
Well, not having Venrick Mark and Christian Jones and Tony Jones as well just really hurts this team right now. Their best offensive players not on the field. Venrick Mark transferred, and both the Joneses have been injured. So it's really been a struggle for Northwestern to score points and get the ball moving. And Trevor Siemian just hasn't looked like himself. And it's unfortunate because there was a lot of potential heading into this season that looks like Northwestern could get back on the winning track and get back to a bowl game, but right now this doesn't appear that's going to happen. I'm glad you brought up Trevor Siemian because, as we mentioned, the Christian Jones gone due to injury. Venrick Mark transfers out. It's new offensive players taking the starting reps now for the Northwestern football team. Does it still feel like maybe just because they're only 3 weeks in that the chemistry is still being worked on, with the mechanics and just the timing of routes? Does it seem like to you that while we're seeing Northwestern go into their 4th week of the 2014 season that the chemistry is still being worked on the offense? It's unfortunate that that's the case because it seemed like they had it going during training camp. I went to a few practices during training camp, and it wasn't until the injuries and the transfers started happening that things started falling apart. So, it's unfortunate that they're still. It's fortunate they're still trying to work things out. So hopefully they can find a way to get it together. Otherwise, it's going to be another long season.
Let's switch over down to Champaign. Illinois football, they are overall 3-1, and that's kind of, to a generic college football fan, a little bit of a shocker there as head coach Tim Beckman has a winning team out there right now, 3-1, and looking at the stats right now, it's Ferguson with 316 yards, 6.3 yards per carry so far. What's been your take on Illini football so far? Because it seems like it's not necessarily saying they're coming out of nowhere, but the competition they have been playing, not something that should be surprising, and it's where Illinois should be 3-1, but they're taking on Nebraska this Saturday. Not an easy foe. Are we going to see that true Illinois football team where, okay, when it's the big game, they're not going to be there?
It's looking that way. I mean, I know their offense is slowly starting to piece it together, but their defense is what concerns me more than anything. They're having trouble making plays. They don't have much of a pass rush. They're having trouble covering guys downfield, and now you're going up against a Nebraska team who has, one of the best offensive players in the country in Amir Abdullah. I mean, you saw what he did to Miami last week, over 200 yards rushing, and, really, I mean, the last thing that you want as a struggling defense is to go up against somebody who is practically impossible to tackle, and that's exactly what the Illini will be facing when they take on Nebraska Saturday. I know that they're 3-1, but last year around the same time they were 3-1. We saw how they collapsed from there. So, really, the Illini, if they can't they can't win at least 5 or 6 games this year, I say Tim Beckman is out, and then they're going to have to look for a new coach because he just hasn't been able to get this team together.
It seems that with Illinois football, it's not the hot spot for recruits. Now, as we saw, now I know that we're talking college football, but switching to basketball here, Jalen Brunson, the star guard from Stevenson High School here from Lincolnshire, Illinois, it was either between Illinois and Villanova. He chooses Villanova, and Illinois, whether it's basketball or football, it seems that they're losing out on some of the big products that they've tried to recruit to bring into their program, whether it's football, basketball, whatever the case may be. Is there something to where it maybe just Illinois, regardless of how the season ends, staff-wise and maybe on the upper executives, does Illinois maybe just need an overhaul just to maybe try to get a new breath of fresh air and somehow try to bring in those better recruits?
I don't know if I want to go there just yet. Obviously, Illinois, I mean, even though they didn't get the guy from Stevenson, they did get a couple other recruits that, kind of made up for that. But the issue with recruiting as far as that goes is just that when you have a team that was down for so long like Illinois was, and like some of the other schools, but, we're focusing on Illinois here, it's kind of hard to get players because they look at the losing records, they look at, how the team has struggled, and, they start thinking to themselves, well, can I really make a difference, or are they just saying that just so sign a letter of intent? So really it's just a matter of, what it is that they can, whether or not they believe they can actually help the team. And now with Illinois, remodeling their arena and, with the other facility upgrades and other things they've been doing, hopefully it'll be easier to get recruits down the line. But, it's not just Illinois. It's pretty much schools in the state as a whole that's having trouble getting recruits.
Freelance writer Gabe Salgado with me here on the Illinois Center for Broadcasting Hotline. If you've ever thought about a career in broadcasting, go to the Illinois Center for Broadcasting. Check it out at beonair.com or dial 630-916-1700. Let's head out west here to DeKalb, Illinois. That's where we find the Huskies of Northern Illinois. 3-1 on the season. They just come off their loss on September 20th. Against Arkansas. They have the bye week, the Huskies, this week. They will play and host Kent State on October 4th. When I watch Northern Illinois football, Gabe, it's just not the same without seeing Jordan Lynch, number 6, out there. It seems to be that, Northern Illinois is, not obviously stuck in the post-Jordan Lynch era or anything, and they're not suffering for it. But going down the MAC list here, does it seem like Northern Illinois could still have that success they had with Jordan Lynch now just without him?
I think they can. They're going to lean more on their run game, and they're going to lean more on their defense. They're definitely going to have to lean more on their run game now that Tommy Lee Lewis is out for the season with whatever injury he has. The university doesn't really specify injuries for whatever reason. But, losing one of their receivers like that, they're going to have to lean on their running game a little bit more. And you saw how so far that's worked. Now, granted, the Arkansas game, that was a rough game, and take it for what you will, but they're still a good team. They're still a good offensive team, and, their defense really, aside from the Arkansas game, they've actually been pretty good. There was concern about their defense, especially the lack of depth on the defensive line, but, so far they've managed to get it done. I think Northern Illinois will be just fine. They just got to find a way to work past losing Tommy Lee Lewis.
Looking back now to Big Ten football, obviously we are in the new college football playoff system. The top 4 teams make it into the playoff. Those 4 teams will vie it out for a chance to be in the national championship game late December, early January. Is it going to be considered a major disappointment if the Big Ten does not get a representative into that college football playoff? Because I look at it as the SEC is so dominant, I would not be surprised if they had 2 of the 4, and then maybe the Pac-12 could have one, and maybe the Big 12 has one as well with potentially the Oklahoma Sooners. So would it be a big disappointment this season if Big Ten football did not get into the college football playoff?
I think it's a big disappointment already simply for the fact that you're only picking 4 teams. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they base their selection criteria, and there's going to be a lot of teams that aren't going to be happy. I think that, there are other ways that they could have made the system, but that's a story for another time because it's too long of a conversation, believe me. But, I think it's a disappointment already simply because it's only 4 teams that are going, and there's really going to be a lot of angry fans and a lot of angry alumni, that's going to be disappointed once those playoff selections are announced. And, unfortunately, it's looking like the Big Ten might not even be in it this year. So, hopefully they'll add more teams down the line or maybe overhaul the system altogether. But, so far I'm not a big fan of it.
Looking at the Big Ten standings right now, it's Penn State leading the East with a record of 4-0, 1-0 in conference play, as they've been the only conference game against Rutgers. They won that one 13-10. Over in the West, it's Nebraska with an undefeated record at 4-0. Those are the top dogs in the Big Ten right now. When it all comes down to it, though, who's in the Big Ten championship?
Well, obviously Penn State and Nebraska are looking like the front runners, but again, it's only September. Only time will tell. You take a look at some of the other games on the team schedules, it's very possible, that Penn State could get knocked off by Ohio State, maybe Michigan State. Those are going to be their biggest tests. Nebraska, it looks like they have an easier path to the West Division, but, you never know. They could get upset down the line. Anything can happen in college football. So I don't think we should pencil in those two teams yet for the Big Ten championship game.
Freelance writer Gabe Salgado with me here on the Fahey and Shivari Show here on SportsTownChicago.com, talking some local college football. Gabe, appreciate you joining the program as always, but before I got to let you go, you know what we do for predictions every week on the show with Bears. And they're playing the Packers this week. I got to get your prediction. Bears-Packers, who wins and why? And a score if you got one.
I'm going to go ahead and say maybe, just maybe, the Bears can squeak out 31-28 victory. I mean, they got a lot of momentum right now, and Green Bay's kind of lost their swagger, if you will. I don't really use that word, but way to describe how they're doing both offensively and defensively. Now, granted, I think Aaron Rodgers will still be a formidable opponent. I still think he'll find a way to get a rhythm going, but the Packers not being able to run the ball and their defense not playing so great over the last couple of weeks, I think that the Bears can just manage to speak this one up if they don't have any more injuries and they play mistake-free football.
You guys can follow Gabe on Twitter at Gabe Salgado82. Gabe, thanks for joining the program. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day, my man.
All right, take care.
That's freelance writer Gabe Salgado. Again, you guys can follow him on Twitter at Gabe Salgado82. That's GABESALGADO, and then the numbers 8 and 2.
You're listening to Fahey and Shivari on SportsTownChicago.com.